Today I'd like to talk to you about two related but slightly different business ideas. Now both these ideas are in our syllabus, the HSC Business Studies syllabus, and probably these ideas do relate to part of the subject in Year 11 and definitely in Year 12. Now the first subject I'd like to talk to you about is the business life cycle. Now this particular idea is really well demonstrated through a diagram. Now when we do our HSC, we often say to you, look, if you put a diagram in there, it can often express certain ideas very quickly, which may take many words to do otherwise. Now the business life cycle, the axes in the diagram, they relate to on the top sales and on the bottom time. Now the business life cycle, it relates to the way the business goes through stages in its development. Now look, not all businesses actually get through all the stages of the life cycle, but if they did, the stages would look like this. First, we'll talk about the establishment stage. This is where the entrepreneurs first set up the business. It's unknown and it's got no sales, and all that they're doing is putting in their capital to try and get the business going. Now that establishment phase could last 6 months, it could last a year, it could last longer, but it's the phase where the business, as I say, is unknown. Now gradually, as the business gets known and starts to make sales, we get what's called growth. And so the second stage of the business life cycle is the growth stage. Now again, there's no set scale when this should occur, but if a business is not growing after, say, 6 months to a year, it could signal problems. There are exceptions. Some businesses, like Foxtel, probably took 10 years not only to just grow, but to establish themselves in such a way that they were a profitable business. Having said that, most businesses, if they're not profitable within a year, they've usually got some sorts of problems and they don't go too much further. Now, the growth phase of the business is followed after that by the third stage, which is called the maturity stage. Now again, maturity can last 6 months, it could last a year, it could last 100 years. Some products like Mars bars have been around a long time, and you'd say that they're quite steady, their sales are steady, their profit is steady, and there's no reason for, say, a business that was making something like Mars to do anything too different, because they've probably got the balance right. Now what we say with the fourth stage in the business life cycle is that you come to a stage of choice, and that stage, you could name it different things. If the business is not going particularly well, it may come up with some new sorts of ideas. It gets what's called renewal, and so in terms of our diagram, the maturity stage adapts slightly and starts to go up. Sometimes though, businesses after maturity go into what's called the decline stage, and decline can take different amounts of time. But once a business is in decline, often it's a process that's really hard to reverse. The end of the decline stage is what we call cessation. Now that may be an unfamiliar word, but it relates to the word cease. And so, as you can expect, when a business gets to the cessation stage in its life cycle, it's usually likely to finish. Now, the second diagram that I want to talk to you about is also one which is really useful for our course. And rather than talking about a particular whole business, we talk about individual products. This diagram is called the product life cycle. Now once again, the actual diagram, on the top axis we talk about sales, and on the bottom axis we talk about time. Now, as opposed to the business life cycle where we had establishment, with the product life cycle, we talk about introduction of the product. Now again, once the product's introduced, it's usually not really known, it needs to be marketed to establish sales. Now once that marketing is done and those sales are established, we talk about growth phase for the particular product. Now again, once growth gets to a certain stage and the business becomes quite stable, consistently selling and consistently make a product, we talk about the maturity stage. Now this stage could go for quite a while as well. In modern times we see a lot of electronic products where the maturity stage of the product is relatively short. The product's introduced, it has growth, a relatively short maturity stage, and then by design, the product is often withdrawn. So that's the fourth stage in the product life cycle, the withdrawal stage. Now, an extension of this particular idea of the product life cycle is one which reflects reality more, in that if you took a particular technological product, say like an iPhone, the company's probably got 4 or 5 products on the production line ready to go. And so, just say for example, you took the iPhone 1. The iPhone 1 went through all those stages. It was introduced, it had growth in sales, there was a maturity stage, and then it was withdrawn. Now, Apple, who are pretty innovative, they would have been pretty silly just to have the one product ready with nothing to follow it up. And so as we know, you've had iPhone 2, 3, 4, 4S, 5 and 5S at the moment. Now, if you can imagine that all of these product lifecycle diagrams could be put on one diagram. And so when Apple know that their product's going through that maturity phase and it's a technological product, it's not going to last too long, they really need to have the next product ready to go. And that's what they do. And so even though today we've got the 5S, it's quite likely that Apple have got plans ahead for maybe 2 or 3 other products stretching into the next 3 or 4 years. Okay, I spoke about a lot there. Let me just sort of summarise the things I've said. There are 2 main diagrams I've spoken about today. It's the business life cycle diagram, which has got establishment, growth, maturity and cessation. And then we've got the product life cycle, individual products, where instead of establishment we talk about the introduction of the product. We still talk about growth, and we still talk about maturity stage, but what usually happens is the product is actually withdrawn eventually. Now, you'd know that. So for instance, if you had a computer with, say, Windows 98 on it, and that something went wrong on that computer today, if you phoned up Microsoft and said, look, I've got a Windows 98 computer, can you help me? What they'd probably say to you is, we no longer support that particular version of the product. We're now 2 or 3 versions down the track. Now that's got some implications for business and society. What we talk about is an idea called planned obsolescence. So whether it's Apple or Microsoft, they don't plan for their products to last forever. They plan for them to be obsolete, so the word obsolescence comes in. Now, related to that is another idea called the creation of needs. If we're happy with our Windows 98 or we're happy with our iPhone 3, those particular businesses may be a little bit worried, and they may be asking the question, where's their next sales going to come from? So what they do for their marketing is, as soon as you buy your particular product, whether it's the iPhone 4S or whatever it is, you can bet your life that they'll be advertising what comes next. And really, marketing works largely psychologically on convincing existing and potential customers that a new version of the product needs to be bought. Now, in our syllabus, you'll see there are ethical and moral considerations to take, and some people will say, well look, having people persuaded that their particular product's no good anymore and needs to be withdrawn, there's a moral and ethical dilemma there. Not just because they're convincing people, you know, and creating new needs for those people, but it's really a bit of a waste of resources. And what we know in a lot of the landfill around the world today, we've got a lot of technological products. So that's a question that comes up in the syllabus, and I think it's one you should realise, that it's not just annoying for the customer that these products are introduced and then quite quickly withdrawn, but for society, future generations, the idea is what's the point of allowing businesses to do that? Because at the end of the day, they're going to the world's going to run out of some of these finite resources. Okay, thanks for listening.